In 2018, a 22-year-old woman stepped into the heart of the African wilderness, expecting wonder, never imagining it would end in horror. What began as an innocent visit to a game reserve near Pretoria, South Africa, slowly twisted into something else entirely. She hadn't even planned to be there. She was simply accompanying a friend on an informal visit to a lion sanctuary nestled inside the 200-acre Dinokeng Big 5 Game Reserve. Her friend had arranged to interview the camp's manager. For her, it was just a side trip, a chance to snap a few photos, breathe the wild air, and stand in awe of creatures most people only see on screens. The sanctuary was home to Kevin Richardson, the famed lion whisperer, whose near-mystical connection to his lions had captivated the world. She must have felt safe, even inspired. After all, these weren't just wild lions, they were his lions, trained, handled, adored. And on that day, as the sun filtered through the bush and the sky stretched wide and calm, 3 of them were out on a routine walk. Richardson, as always, walked nearby. Nothing seemed out of place, until it was. One of the lionesses spotted an impala, a blur of muscle and bone. The antelope bolted into the open. That single flicker of movement was enough to trigger everything. The lioness charged, ears flat, eyes locked, body alive with instinct. The chase was on. No one realized where she was headed. The impala darted, vanished into the bush. The lioness, completely engulfed in the hunt, gave chase, running full speed through the reserve. 2, maybe 2.5 kilometers, barely minutes for an animal like her. In the madness of pursuit, the boundaries between predator and everything else fell away. And then she saw something. The woman had wandered just outside the fenced area, maybe a few steps too far, maybe just close enough to get a better photo. She never saw the lioness, but the lioness saw her. There was no time to react, no time to shout or run or understand. The lioness lunged, and in an instant the scene transformed, tranquility to terror. The sound of paws on dirt, the weight of 300 pounds of muscle, the crunch of impact. She was knocked down, mauled with staggering force before anyone could blink. Her friend watched in frozen disbelief, unable to move, powerless as teeth met flesh, as claws tore through skin. The lioness wasn't enraged. She wasn't confused. She was still in hunt mode, operating on the oldest instinct written into the bones of predators. It ended quickly, brutally. Blood stained the dust. The woman's body lay twisted and motionless beneath the lioness's heaving chest. The breathless stillness of the African bush returned, but not the kind that brings peace. Paramedics rushed to the scene. Sirens pierced the silence, wheels kicking up red earth. But by the time they reached her, there was nothing left to save. Her injuries were beyond anything medicine could undo. Nick Dahlman, the paramedic spokesman, would later call the scene horrific. Kevin Richardson was shattered. He posted a message filled with grief. "I am devastated. My heart goes out to this young woman's family." He explained that alerts had been sent out. The team had followed protocol. This was never supposed to happen, but it had. Dinokeng's management clarified the facts, insisting the lioness wasn't one of the park's free-roaming wild lions. She was a sanctuary lion, monitored, familiar. Still, none of that mattered. A young woman was gone, her life taken in a matter of seconds by a creature she never even had a chance to fear. The tragedy sent ripples through Richardson's world. Not long before, supermodel Cara Delevingne had posed with one of his lions in a glossy photo shoot, calling it humbling, a beautiful, intimate experience. But the intimacy of wild things comes with a price, and sometimes that price is blood. Visitors still come. Volunteers still arrive to walk the reserve and learn from Kevin. The allure is powerful. The thrill of being close to lions, of brushing against danger while believing you're safe, still draws people in. But for anyone paying attention, that young woman's death is the reminder beneath it all. No matter how experienced the handler, how well trained the animal, how calm the moment may seem, lions do not hesitate. They don't pause. They don't forgive distractions. Out here, there are no guarantees. There is only instinct. And whether you're a photographer or a whisperer or an unsuspecting visitor, if you cross the line at the wrong time, you don't get to cross back. In April 2014, 2 Dutch students, 21-year-old Chris Kremers and 22-year-old Lisanne Froon, embarked on what was meant to be the trip of a lifetime. Bright, adventurous, and full of hope, the young women had traveled to Panama with plans to volunteer, explore the culture, and enjoy the breathtaking landscapes. After arriving in the town of Boquete, known for its lush mountains and popular hiking trails, the two seemed to be adjusting well. But on April 1st, things took a tragic turn. That morning, they set off on a hike along the El Pianista Trail, a route that starts off easy and scenic, but can quickly become treacherous the deeper one goes into the jungle. They were never seen alive again. Initially, their absence didn't trigger much concern. It wasn't uncommon for travelers to go off-grid for a day or two. However, when they failed to meet a local guide for a planned tour the next day, alarm bells began to ring. Within days, a search operation was underway involving local police, dogs, helicopters, and even Dutch authorities who flew in to assist. Despite extensive efforts, no trace of the girls was found. It wasn't until 10 weeks later that a breakthrough came, but it only deepened the mystery. A local woman found a backpack near a riverbank. Inside were some strange clues: both Lisanne's and Chris's phones, a camera, sunglasses, a water bottle, and 2 bras, all surprisingly well preserved despite the wet environment. The phone data was chilling. The women had attempted to call emergency services 112, Dutch, and 911, Panamanian, starting just hours after they left for the hike. Multiple attempts were made over several days, but there was no signal. The final successful interaction with a phone was April 11th, 10 days after their disappearance. After that, the phones stopped working altogether. As investigators reviewed the camera's memory card, things got even stranger. There were over 90 photos taken after the time they were believed to be lost. Many of them were snapped at night, showing nothing but darkness or vague images of jungle foliage, tree branches, and rocks. A few showed what appeared to be one of the girl's belongings laid out on a rock, possibly as a signal or distress message. One haunting photo showed the back of Chris's head, with what some interpret as blood or injury, though this remains speculative. Soon after, more personal items and human remains were discovered. A fragment of Lisanne's foot, still in her boot, and parts of a pelvis were found near the river. Even more unsettling was the discovery of Chris's denim shorts, found neatly folded atop a rock far from the backpack. The conditions of the remains raised questions. Some bones were bleached unnaturally white with no soft tissue left, while others appeared relatively fresh. Autopsies were inconclusive. Authorities ruled out foul play, suggesting that the girls may have slipped and fallen, possibly trying to cross the river or escape deeper into the jungle. However, critics questioned this theory, pointing out inconsistencies such as the odd state of the belongings, the phone activity timeline, and the strange sequence of photos. To this day, the case remains unresolved. The deaths were ruled accidental by Panamanian officials, but many believe the full story has never been told. The disappearance of Chris and Lisanne continues to fascinate and disturb, a stark reminder of how quickly an adventure can turn into a nightmare, and how nature, no matter how beautiful, holds secrets that may never be uncovered. The Namibian night was still, the kind of stillness that makes every sound feel louder, every shadow deeper. The stars hung low and bright above the desert, casting a soft light over the Hoanib River Valley, where silence cloaks everything in illusion. It was the kind of night that seems timeless. Beautiful, yes, but never truly safe. Bernd Kebbel, a 59-year-old German businessman known for his success and generosity, stepped out of his luxury tent near the Skeleton Coast. It was just a brief moment. He was going to use the toilet. His wife and their friends remained inside, tucked beneath canvas and calm, unaware that just meters away, something had already begun to stir in the dark. The lioness was already there. Maybe she had been watching for hours, her golden coat blending into the rock and brush, her paws silent on the sand. She moved like a whisper across the earth, drawn in by instinct and opportunity. No roar, no sound, just movement, focused and final. The moment he stepped out, she pounced. There was no time for a scream, no chance to run. Her weight slammed into him, pinning him down. Her jaws, massive and unrelenting, closed fast. By the time the others heard the commotion and burst out of their tents, shouting, scrambling, throwing whatever they could to scare the animal away, it was already too late. Bernd Kebbel was dead. His body lay still beneath the stars as the lioness vanished back into the wild. The silence returned, but it wasn't the same. This time it carried with it a kind of horror that hangs in the air and won't let go. Officials arrived quickly. Police surveyed the site. The Ministry of Environment and Tourism launched an investigation. A report was promised, statements were taken, condolences offered, but none of it could rewrite what had just happened. None of it could give that moment back. Bernd wasn't just another tourist. He had once owned Namibia's Off-Road Center, a supplier of expedition gear and safari accessories, and had spent years supporting conservation work. He understood the wild, respected it. He had given to the land that, in the end, took him, And then, just 2 days later, the lioness was found and euthanized. The decision was swift. Authorities deemed her a continuing threat, not just to tourists, but to the surrounding communities. She had crossed the line from wild to dangerous, they said. But had she? Or had she simply done what lions have always done, seized an opportunity in a land that gives them fewer and fewer? In this harsh corner of northwest Namibia, desert-adapted lions are ghosts on the sand. Only around 60 adults remained as of last year, their numbers dwindling with the prey they rely on and the human encroachment they can't avoid. Drought has stolen their food. Roads have carved through their silence. Fear has met them head-on. Bernd Kebbel was a man who believed in nature's raw beauty, who spent his life exploring it, equipping others to do the same. He knew the risks, but no one expects that moment. No one imagines that stepping out under the stars could be their last breath. This wasn't just a tragic accident, it was a collision between the human desire for connection with the wild and the wild's unforgiving reality. Because in places like Huanib, the line between wonder and danger is invisible. And when it's crossed, there are no warnings, only silence, teeth, and what's left behind. In 2013, the tragic death of Elisa Lamb at Los Angeles' infamous Cecil Hotel captured global attention and became one of the most disturbing and mysterious cases involving a tourist. Elisa was a 21-year-old student from Vancouver, Canada, traveling alone through California. Intelligent, thoughtful, and active online, she documented much of her trip through blog posts and social media updates. On January 26th, she checked into the Cecil Hotel, an aging building in downtown LA with a notoriously dark past that included links to suicides, murders, and even serial killers. Elisa likely chose it for affordability, not knowing it would become the center of a mystery that would baffle investigators and haunt the internet for years. By February 1st, Elisa's family, who she had been calling daily, stopped hearing from her. Concerned, they reported her missing. The Los Angeles police department searched the hotel but initially found no sign of her. With no leads, they released a piece of elevator surveillance footage that became the most famous and disturbing aspect of the case. In the video, Elisa enters the elevator and begins pressing multiple buttons. Her behavior appears erratic as she peeks outside as if she's being followed, moves strangely, hides in the corner, and gestures in ways that many found unsettling. The elevator doors remain open far longer than normal, adding to the eerie nature of the footage. The video quickly went viral, sparking endless speculation. Some believed she was having a mental health episode. Others thought she was being stalked. Some viewers even suspected something supernatural at play. Internet users dissected every frame, generating theories that ranged from logical to bizarre. Some believed she was under the influence of drugs, although toxicology later ruled that out. Others thought she was interacting with someone just outside the camera's view. A few connected her behavior to urban legends, such as the so-called elevator game, which supposedly transports players to another realm. The case took a horrifying turn on February 19th, when guests at the hotel began complaining of low water pressure and strange-tasting water. Maintenance staff went to check the rooftop water tanks. Inside one of them, they made a gruesome discovery. Elisa's naked body was floating in the tank with her clothes and belongings nearby. The tanks were large, heavy, and difficult to access, situated on the roof behind locked and alarmed doors. Somehow, Elisa had gotten inside. The official cause of death was listed as accidental drowning. The autopsy revealed no signs of physical trauma or sexual assault, and toxicology tests showed only her prescribed medication for bipolar disorder. Investigators suggested she may have experienced a mental health crisis that led her to climb into the tank voluntarily. However, many found this explanation unsatisfying. The hotel's poor security, the strange elevator footage, and the difficulty in reaching the tank made the conclusion feel incomplete to some. The case fueled a wave of conspiracy theories. Some were based on real coincidences, like a tuberculosis outbreak in the area being tested with a kit named Lamb Elisa. Others were more sensational, involving foul play or paranormal influences. Though none of these were proven, they helped cement Elisa Lamb's story as an internet obsession and modern urban legend. Her death also reignited public interest in the Cecil Hotel, which had long been associated with tragedy and crime. The hotel closed for renovations shortly after, and remains a symbol of the darker side of urban history. Elisa's story was later explored in Netflix's 2021 documentary Crime Scene, The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, where experts, internet users, and investigators tried to piece together what really happened. Though the official narrative points to a tragic accident linked to mental health, the case continues to raise uncomfortable questions and remains deeply unsettling to this day. It was meant to be the kind of afternoon you remember forever, the kind you tell stories about for years. A sun-soaked drive through South Africa's Lion Park. A car rolling slowly through the golden sprawl of Bushveld. Windows down, cameras raised, hearts beating a little faster as lions roamed freely just meters away. For one 22-year-old American tourist and her male companion, it felt like stepping into a dream. The lions moved like shadows, silent, majestic, ancient. The thrill of being so close to something so powerful was intoxicating. 1 second, you're holding your breath to capture the perfect photo. The next, you're face to face with nature at its most unforgiving. She never saw it coming. The lioness appeared from the grass, golden coat glinting under the sun, her eyes locked on the vehicle. She didn't roar, she didn't growl, just approached, smooth, deliberate, calm. For a heartbeat, everything was still, and then it wasn't. In a blur of motion, the lioness lunged, claws scraped against metal. Massive jaws snapped through the open passenger window like a nightmare tearing through the veil of safety. There was no warning, no time to scream, no time to hit the button to roll the glass back up. In an instant, the young woman was gone. From the seat beside her companion to the crushing grip of the wild, dragged half from the vehicle, her body twisted violently by the raw power of the predator. Her companion shouted, grabbed, fought, helpless against muscle and instinct honed by millennia. Park staff raced toward the scene, but seconds matter in the wild, and by the time help arrived, the damage had been done. Blood soaked the car seat. The cameras were forgotten. The silence that followed was the kind that only comes after something irreversible. She died before paramedics could even try to save her. The man survived, wounded, shaken, still alive. But how do you process something like that? One moment, they were side by side, wrapped in the thrill of adventure. The next, she was gone forever, taken by the very wildness they'd come to witness. Authorities opened an investigation, as they always do when humans are reminded that they're not in control out here. A police spokesman called it an unnatural death, as though anything about being dragged from your car by a lion could ever feel natural. But this wasn't the first time. Lion Park was famous for letting guests get close. Too close. Just months before, an Australian tourist had been bitten in the leg for lowering his window. A 13-year-old boy had been attacked by a cheetah after slipping through a fence. Every incident carried the same warnings, repeated like a chant. Keep your windows up. Stay inside the vehicle. Don't forget where you are. But warnings blur when the line between thrill and danger feels so thin, when lions seem calm, when everything feels under control until it isn't. The fate of the lioness remained unknown. Would she be relocated, killed, kept behind barriers? No one said for sure. After all, she hadn't broken any rules. She was the rule. She followed the only law the wild has ever known. Survival, instinct, dominance. There was no villain here, just a moment. A choice, a rule ignored, and a life ended. That's the danger of the wild. It doesn't ask for your trust. It doesn't offer second chances. And when it reaches back, it does so without mercy. Gabby Patito's story started like something straight out of a millennial travel vlog. A young couple, a white van, and the open road. Gabby, a 22-year-old aspiring travel influencer, and her fiancé, Brian Laundrie, set off in July 2021 to document their cross-country road trip through the lens of van life. They shared pictures of sweeping landscapes, national parks, and smiling selfies. Everything seemed picture-perfect. But as the internet would soon learn, Instagram rarely shows the full story. As the couple journeyed westward, cracks began to show. In August, police in Moab, Utah were called after a bystander saw them arguing. Officers' body cam footage later revealed a tearful Gabby and a scratched-up Brian, with Gabby visibly distressed. The incident was labeled as a mental health crisis and no charges were filed. But looking back, it was a chilling moment that hinted at something much deeper. Fast forward to early September. Brian returned home to Florida. Alone, no Gabby, no explanation. Just a silent man back at his parents' house while Gabby's family anxiously waited for any word from her. When they hadn't heard from her in days, they reported her missing on September 11th, 2021, and the mystery exploded into national headlines. Where was Gabby? Why wasn't Brian talking? Why was he lawyering up and refusing to help? Social media detectives sprang into action, picking apart every post, every video, every detail of their trip. Meanwhile, the Laundrie family kept their lips sealed, fueling public suspicion. Then, on September 19th, the worst was confirmed. Gabby's remains were found in Grand Teton National Park, Wyoming. She had been strangled to death, and the coroner estimated she had died around late August. The heartbreak was immense. This wasn't just a missing person case anymore. It was a homicide. And Brian? He'd vanished into thin air just days before Gabby's body was discovered. A full-on manhunt began, stretching across swamps, trails, and forests in Florida. For weeks, nothing. Just theories, sightings, and a growing sense of frustration. Then, on October 20th, skeletal remains were found in a nature preserve near Brian's home, along with a dry bag that held a notebook. DNA confirmed it was Brian, and the notebook contained what authorities called a written confession. He admitted to killing Gabby. The case, in a legal sense, was closed, but emotionally, far from it. The nation had become deeply invested, not just in the mystery, but in the heartbreak of Gabby's family and the signs that were missed along the way. The story sparked bigger conversations about domestic violence, toxic relationships, and how often victims are overlooked even when signs are right in front of us. It also brought up serious discussions about media bias and why some missing people get national attention while others do not. The term missing white woman syndrome re-entered the conversation, highlighting the disparity in coverage depending on race, gender, and socioeconomic status. Gabby's legacy, however, didn't end with the tragedy. Her family started the Gabby Patito Foundation, dedicated to helping other families of missing persons and raising awareness for domestic violence. Her name became a symbol, not of van life romance, but of how quickly something that looks perfect can turn deadly behind closed doors. It reminded the world to look closer, ask harder questions, and speak up when something feels wrong. Gabby Patito wasn't just another headline. She was a daughter, a sister, a creative spirit with a bright future. And her story, as heartbreaking as it is, lit a fire that continues to push for justice, awareness, and change. Quinn Swales, a 40-year-old British safari guide with a quiet strength and deep reverence for the wild, that moment came in the silent, sunlit stillness of Zimbabwe's Hwange National Park. Quinn had done this countless times, leading groups on foot, teaching them to read the signs written in the earth and leaves, tracking lions not with fear, but with understanding. He knew these lands like the lines on his palms. He trusted them, and that morning, his tourists followed him through the hush of the savannah, not realizing they were steps away from the edge of something unforgiving. Then it happened. From the tall grass, a blur, a sudden unstoppable force. A massive male lion exploded into view. He stepped forward. In that breathless moment, Quinn Swales made a choice only the brave can make. He placed his body between the charging lion and the people he had vowed to protect. With only his voice, his presence, and every ounce of his knowledge, he tried to stop the inevitable. He did everything he could to draw the lion's wrath to himself and away from them, and it worked. The lion veered toward him, away from the group, but the cost was unimaginable. It happened so fast. Claws tore flesh, jaws clamped down, blood splashed across the grass. The tourists, too stunned to scream, could only watch as the man who had just moments ago led them calmly through the wilderness was now locked in a fatal struggle against nature's rawest violence. He never stood a chance. By the time help arrived, it was already too late. Quinn lay crumpled in the dirt, his body broken but his mission fulfilled. Not a single tourist had been harmed. He had bought their lives with his own. News of his death hit hard, and it hit globally. Not just because a man had died, but because this man had lived so intentionally. He had once been a pilot, soaring above the world, but gave it up to be on the ground among the wild things he loved. He didn't just guide people. He taught them to feel the wild, to understand its rhythm, its wonder, its danger. Friends, family, and strangers alike mourned him. His fellow rangers were gutted. Tourists who had once walked behind him through the bush couldn't believe it. Social media flooded with memories of his calm voice, his infectious passion, his quiet bravery. And then came the cruel twist. Only weeks before Quinn's death, Hwange National Park had already been in the global spotlight because of another lion, one whose name had become legend, Cecil, the black-maned king who roamed the park as if it were his personal throne. He had been part of an Oxford research study, tracked, beloved, protected, until he wasn't. Cecil had been lured out of the safe zone by an American dentist named Walter Palmer, lured, wounded with a bow, then stalked for 40 long hours before the final shot ended him. The outcry was massive, international, but it didn't bring Cecil back. What few knew was that Quinn Swales had admired that lion. He had taken pictures of him, even used one as his Facebook cover photo. And now, fate had dealt its cruelest hand. Quinn, a defender of lions, had died at the claws of one, but not out of irony, out of instinct. That's the part people always forget. Lions don't know legacies. They don't know heroes. They know hunger, territory, survival. The lion that killed Quinn wasn't evil. It was wild. Australia in the early 1990s was a backpacker's paradise. Imagine it. Cheap hostels, long open roads, stunning beaches, kangaroos bouncing around like they owned the place. It was practically calling out to young adventurers. Many travelers, especially from Europe, couldn't resist the lure. But beneath that sunny postcard exterior was a dark tale unfolding in the shadows of Belanglo State Forest, a quiet, eerie patch of wilderness about 90 minutes south of Sydney. Between 1989 and 1993, 7 young backpackers vanished without a trace. These weren't people who just ghosted their friends for a bit of soul-searching. Something sinister was going on. The victims included German tourists Gabor Neugebauer and Anja Habschied, British backpackers Caroline Clark and Joanne Walters, and Australian travelers Deborah Everest, James Gibson, and Simone Schmidl. Their remains were found dumped in the forest, often covered with sticks or arranged in bizarre ways. The condition of the bodies told a truly horrifying story. Most were bound, stabbed repeatedly, and some were even shot in the head execution style. Caroline Clark had been shot 10 times in the skull. Anja Habschied was decapitated, and her head was never found. The brutality wasn't random. It was systematic, sadistic, and terrifyingly personal. Police were stumped for a while. The forest was massive, and the bodies were discovered months, sometimes years after the murders. The case didn't break until a very lucky and very brave man named Paul Onions came forward. In 1990, Onions had been hitchhiking near the area when a man picked him up, chatted casually, then suddenly pulled a gun. Paul bolted out of the car, ran for his life, and flagged down another car for help. The guy he escaped was Ivan Milat, but at the time, no one realized how big that tip would be. Fast forward to 1994. After linking Paul's story with new forensic evidence, police raided Milat's home and hit the creepy jackpot. Inside were weapons matching those used in the murders, camping gear and clothes belonging to victims, and even souvenir-style items, like he was keeping trophies. Not exactly the decor you'd want in a guest room. Milat was arrested and put on trial in 1996. He claimed innocence the whole way through, but let's be honest, he didn't stand a chance. The evidence was rock solid. He was convicted of all 7 murders and sentenced to life in prison, never to be released. But here's the truly chilling part. Police believe there may have been more victims, ones they never found. Even his own family suspected he wasn't working alone. Some thought one or more of his brothers may have helped, but only Ivan went down for the crimes, and he kept his secrets locked up tight, right until he died in prison in 2019 from cancer. The backpacker murders shook Australia to its core. Suddenly, hitchhiking didn't seem so carefree, and the wide-open outback felt a lot less safe. Belanglo State Forest became infamous, practically a no-go zone unless you were into true crime tourism. The case led to tighter missing person protocols, improved forensic databases, and a whole lot of people second-guessing roadside rides. While the horror of what happened can't be undone, the strength of survivors like Paul Onions and the relentless determination of investigators brought some measure of justice. And Ivan Milat left behind a legacy no one's proud of, and a forest that will forever carry the echoes of his terrible crimes. The lion park near Johannesburg looked like paradise, wild, untouched, and teeming with life. For Catherine Chappell, a 29-year-old American with a fearless heart and a camera in her hand, it was exactly the kind of day she'd crossed oceans for. She wasn't just a tourist, she was a storyteller, a visual effects editor who had helped conjure dragons for Game of Thrones, chaos for Divergent, and battles for Captain America. But none of those digital illusions could prepare her for what waited just beyond the frame of her lens. She wasn't there just to see lions. She was there to help save them. A passionate conservationist, Catherine had come to South Africa with a mission to document the fight against poaching and give a voice to the silent vanishing of the wild. She'd arrived early, eager to soak in the beauty of the land before her volunteer work began. This was supposed to be a prelude, a warm-up, a moment of awe before the real work began. Instead, it became her final chapter. The safari vehicle crawled along the dusty track, the air thick with the scent of sun-baked earth and the distant call of wildlife. Catherine leaned forward, camera poised, eyes searching the horizon. Then, movement. From the golden grass, a lioness stepped out, silent, powerful, perfect. Her muscles rippled with each graceful step, her amber eyes unblinking. The rule was simple, repeated at every park gate, printed on every pamphlet. Do not open your windows, but wonder can make you forget. The need to capture the moment can override the instinct to protect it. Catherine rolled hers down. The lioness moved closer, not charging, just watching, calculating. She was near enough now that Catherine could see the rise and fall of her breath. The lens lifted. A shot was framed. Then everything snapped. Without a sound, the lioness lunged. An explosion of motion and raw power. The camera dropped. The world blurred. Jaws clamped down in a flash of teeth and fury. There was no time to scream, no time to recoil, just blood and silence. In the front seat, guide Pierre Pochiter grabbed for the lion, for Catherine, for anything, his hands torn open in the struggle, his heart, already weak, seized under the pressure. He collapsed behind the wheel, pain blooming through his chest as the scene spiraled into chaos. The attack lasted mere seconds, but in those seconds everything changed. By the time help arrived, it was far too late. Catherine lay motionless, her body still, her eyes closed to a world she had once sought to understand so deeply. Paramedics did what they could, but the wild is merciless when the line is crossed. There were no second chances. The news swept across continents. Her family shattered. Friends wept. Colleagues in Hollywood mourned. Some asked how it could happen, why it happened. But the truth is stark and sobering. The lion didn't act out of rage or malice. It acted on instinct. Catherine Chappell came to Africa with a heart full of purpose, a desire to tell stories that could spark change, stories rooted in truth. And now, heartbreakingly, her story became one, a cautionary tale, a reminder that beauty and danger walk hand in hand in the wild. That one mistake, one moment, can turn wonder into horror. In May 2005, Natalie Holloway, an 18-year-old honors student from Alabama, boarded a plane to Aruba with her high school classmates for what was meant to be a celebratory graduation trip filled with sun, surf, and a last hurrah before college. But what started as an exciting vacation quickly turned into one of the most baffling and heartbreaking missing person cases in modern memory. On the night of May 30th, Natalie was last seen leaving a popular nightclub called Carlos and Charlie's with 3 local young men. Joran van der Sloot, a 17-year-old Dutch student living in Aruba, and 2 brothers, Deepak and Satish Kalpo. It was supposed to be just another night of fun, but Natalie never returned to her hotel. The next morning, when her classmates prepared to fly home, Natalie was nowhere to be found. Her packed suitcase remained untouched, her passport still in the room, and no one had heard from her. That was when the nightmare began. The disappearance triggered a massive search effort across the island. Volunteers, locals, and even the FBI scoured beaches, drained ponds, and combed through every possible lead. The story captured international attention, especially in the United States, as media outlets covered the case around the clock. Suspicion quickly centered on the last 3 people to see her, Joran van der Sloot and the Kalpo brothers. They were arrested, questioned, and released more than once. Their stories changed repeatedly, shifting from saying they dropped her off at the hotel to saying they went to the beach to saying they did not know. Despite mounting suspicion, there was no physical evidence, no body, and no confession, only conflicting stories and a community desperate for answers. As the months dragged on and the media frenzy continued, Natalie's family, especially her mother Beth Holloway, became tireless advocates in the search for truth. Beth traveled back and forth to Aruba, pushing for justice, appearing on television, and confronting suspects face to face. Her determination kept the case alive, but answers remained elusive. Over time, public attention faded, and the case went cold until another horrific event reignited interest in the man long suspected to be behind Natalie's disappearance. In 2010, 5 years after Natalie vanished, Joran van der Sloot was arrested again, but this time in Peru. He was charged with the brutal murder of a 21-year-old woman named Stephanie Flores, whom he killed in a hotel room just days after meeting her. The crime was shockingly similar in nature and timing, as it occurred exactly 5 years to the day after Natalie's disappearance. This time, there was evidence, a confession, and a conviction. Van der Sloot was sentenced to 28 years in prison in Peru, solidifying suspicions that he had likely been guilty all along in Natalie's case as well. But the final twist did not come until 2023. 18 years after Natalie was last seen alive. As part of a plea deal in a separate extortion case, where he had previously tried to scam Beth Holloway out of a large sum of money for false information about Natalie's remains, Vandersloot finally confessed to her murder. He admitted that after she rejected his advances on the beach, he violently attacked her with a cinder block and pushed her body into the ocean. His chilling confession, though too late for a conviction in Aruba, brought long-awaited closure to a case that haunted a family and a nation for nearly 2 decades. Natalie Holloway's body was never found, but the truth, though buried for years, eventually surfaced and offered justice, even if delayed.